So today we are addressing a very common failure on International Harvester rear Dana 44, specifically the Scout 2 and the later Scout 800s, and that is the axle bearings and seals leaking. You can kind of see that side's wet, that side's completely dry. And when you see this happening, you need to address this basically immediately. It could be a sign of the bearing walking off the shaft. It could be something more serious. We've seen these things kind of fly off housings before. So it's a great time just to, check it out, fix it. So we're gonna kind of be going through here and essentially diving into this thing and seeing what's wrong. And I did the axle bearings on this thing like 4 years ago. So kind of odd that it's leaking. Could be the axle's bent, or which wouldn't surprise me. We kind of use we use this thing quite a lot. So we're gonna start by getting the jack and chalking these tires up and kind of go from there. And when you do this, you're gonna want to have your car in neutral, or your Scout. So you're gonna want to find any sufficient chalking source and just chalk it, because you're gonna want this thing in neutral, because we're gonna need to be spinning the axle shaft. So make sure you're in neutral, or if you have an auto, make sure you're not in park, put it in neutral. Parking brake disengaged, and now you want to jack up the axle on the pumpkin. So you're gonna want to put the jack stands basically right here. It's probably the best form of attack here. And just slowly lower your Scout. And there we go. So you always want to make sure your Scout's not going to fall on you. That looks, decently safe. So we're going to go with that. To take the wheel off, basically every Scout typically has like 13/16 lug nuts. So pretty straightforward. So if your Scout's ever been apart before, I highly doubt your drums are going to come off very easy. Obviously these are painted. That's because I redid these not too long ago. So if it gets stuck, it's usually around this ring here. Just tap it nicely, Don't be a monkey. Sometimes you gotta go in here. You gotta remove this boot right here, and you gotta adjust your brakes in. If your grommet's still there, this grommet is well into there. I will demonstrate. If you do need to adjust your brakes, I'll show you how to do this. This is your little adjuster piece that's inside the drum. This piece goes there. That piece goes against the other side of the brake shoe. And if you turn that one way or the other, depending on which side it is, you will then move your brake shoes in or move it out. So really, if you're a skilled hammerist, you can get anything done with whatever hammer. So your drum should just kind of fall off after you have everything loose, which in this case, it's playing nicely. So there's our drum. I mean, while you're here, you might as well inspect this. Seems good enough for me. Now we're gonna do some investigating here, and sure enough, we have some gear oil leaking through there. And as to why it is, I don't know. So the next step here is to get a 3/4 inch socket. So it's pretty straightforward. You don't need a wrench for the backside. And word of caution, you're gonna want a drain pan under this. There's gonna be oil coming out of here. Once you got those bolts out, this thing just kind of comes out. And if it doesn't come out, use a pry bar. Just don't be a monkey, kind of just shove it somewhere like here and just kind of break it free. It should just come out just like that. And word of caution is when you go to do this, your backing plate's going to be loose. So make sure you're not monkeying on it, because it will just kind of flop around. So pull your axle shaft out like that and slip it on out of the housing. And a couple very notable things just happened as we pulled this thing out, and I'll kind of show you some common issues with the Dana 44. Let's just call it that. So grab your rag, shove it in here, because it will keep leaking gear oil continuously, and it's kind of annoying. And just kind of don't touch anything here. Leave it alone, because this will fall out if the bolts back out. So leave it as is. Leave your pan here, and we'll kind of focus over to our issue. So as you can tell, our bearing race came out with the axle bearing, which is generally not good. And another not good thing is this axle shaft sleeve is actually coming out. There's a little gap here, so that's evident that this thing is slowly tweaking itself off, which is kind of normal for a Dana 44 if you load it up as much as we do, at least with this vehicle. So we're going to basically be taking this over to the bench, and we're going to need to basically cut this stuff off, and I'll kind of show you how it's done. It's pretty simple. So we got the axle shaft chucked up in the vise. You're going to want to do this. Just doing a little bit of analysis here, and you see this bearing raise. I don't know if you can really tell on camera, but it's only worn to one side. So that basically indicates the axle is bent, and that's a very common issue with Dana 44s. I'm not going to quite divulge into how to fixing that today, because this is just kind of a shop truck, work truck, you know, beater. So we're not too concerned with it being bent. We're just going to slap a new bearing on it, and hopefully it lasts another, you know, couple years until we have to address it. So this is kind of where we need to start cutting, and where safety glasses and hearing protection are advised. So when you do this, you're going to need a grinder, the cutoff wheel on it, and the objective here is to slit this. And it's fine to dig into the bearing while you're doing this. You want to slit this collar just enough to where you're not touching the axle shaft, and it's kind of tricky, so just, you know, don't rush this, and just don't gouge into the axle shaft, and you'll be fine. So we're gonna get started here. So we've ground a decent amount of this down, and then what you're going to do is get a chisel and a hammer, stick it in there, and see if you can chisel it and have it crack free. So we got it to crack free. So basically, if you look in there, there's a little micro crack. Probably can't tell, but I'll show you. So that's our first step. So this is now free and hot. So our second plan of attack is getting this off. Basically there, you could just chisel it off. So, just like that. Now, the cage is out of the way. All we have left is this inner race, and this one's pretty tricky because you're really near the axle shaft. So when you go to cut this at the longest angle you can, so you're not really digging deep into the end of the axle shaft and then the front of it. So there you go. So now that part is ready to be punched out. Then your seal just pops off, and then you got your plate. So now when you go take your shaft out, everything slides off, and you're ready for a new bearing. So now that you got the bearing off, you're going to inspect this axle shaft. I mean, it's not going to look perfect. It's about 50 years old. So in the IH Parts America store, we sell these heavy-duty axle retainer plates. Grabbed a new one because I didn't realize I had put one in 5 years ago, but this one's perfectly fine, so we're going to reuse it. But definitely going to want to upgrade to one of these if you have never replaced your plate before, if it's still like the 1/8 inch one. These are 1/4 inch, and a lot safer if your axle bearing does start eating the plate. So you'll get, you know, 100 more miles out of it before it flies out. So we also sell the Timken branded axle bearings that come with the correct outer seal. So a few parts of this, you have the outer seal, and you have the plate disc device in here, which is what that is. Then you have the actual bearing. So now we're getting into the fun stuff. So we're gonna assemble this axle shaft, which first thing you do, slide your plate on. The second thing you do is you slide your seal on the correct way. So you want this side that way. So slide that on there. And what also helps is if you put some lube around this, you can really use anything to lube it as long as it's, you know, of some sort of lubricating value. So I found this, you know, about 2 feet away. So we're gonna spray some of this WD-40 roller chain lube around this. That'll keep it moisturized until the gear oil gets there. So slide your seal on like that all the way, and then you want to get your bearing, and you want to make sure you install this the correct orientation. You want this thin part towards the flange. So you slide that onto there, and then your sleeve goes on. So now we need to get to the press, and we're going to press this stuff together. And you really don't want to press this stuff dry, so what I like to do is just grab whatever and just spray this, and then put the lubricant across the shafts. When you're pressing this on, you're not pressing stuff on dry. All right, so I got this axle shaft assembly jigged up here, and just used 2 rubber plates. Shaft sticking there. There's room for it to move. Got this random piece of steel right here as a spacer, and now all we got to do is just press this bearing on. Just like that. There we are. Plate, seal, bearing, collar. Make sure it's pressed on all the way. We're looking good, and we can move back to the axle. So most of the time when you do these, this outer bearing race kind of falls off the machined ring that this thing has. So don't worry about that. We'll cover that here in a bit. So now that we're back at the axle, before you get the axle shaft in, we're gonna do a little bit of cleaning here. Get some brake clean. And she's good as new. So grab your bearing race out of here. And the big problem with Dana 44s are this bearing race isn't tight in the housing anymore. And in this case, it's still decently tight. So if your bearing race slips in and out of this thing and it's loose, you need to peen this all around. So you need to get a centering punch and put like probably 40 dots in a line, you know, all across this, just so when this thing seats in there, it doesn't move around. So always check that before putting this in. And as far as putting this race in, it's nice to have a race driver. So our bearing race is in there. Another thing to note also, if you have an earlier axle housing, which is I think up to 74, you're going to have an inner axle seal in here, and you're going to want to replace that when you're here. It'll be right here. So we can see through this thing. There is no axle seal, which is very normal of a 1980 and anything over 74. So if you have an axle seal there, you're going to need to replace that. So once your bearing race is in, there's really nothing else to do but reverse the process. So slide your axle shaft back in, and then you're going to want to align your retaining plate. Get all your lock nuts started, you want to make sure you go on the back side here. And if you look, these bolts have a flat side to it. You want to make sure they're still flat against the axle too when you go to impact these in. Sometimes they fall out and you end up getting the round part of the bolt on the tube, and it actually cocks the bolt one way and damages the outside of this axle housing. So alright, once you get that done, I know they're tight, so if you don't trust yourself, you can also check it with a ratchet. There's not really a torque spec, just, you know, you want it tight. Obviously it's an axle shaft. Get your drum, and you're basically done. So now we get to put the wheel on. And if you went ahead and adjusted your parking brake adjuster, you need to put your boot back in and probably adjust your e-brake back out. So save yourself the headache later and throw some anti-seize on your threads. Alright, so that's basically it. We're done here. Axle shaft is happy. Did this all outside on jack stands, so nothing crazy that you need to get this job done. Really, it's just preventative maintenance. I've seen plenty of axle shafts fly out of these things from our customers or just neglect. It is a major wear item of a Dana 44. So while I'm here, I'm going to do a differential fluid service since I'm here. And I'm not going to videotape that because it's pretty simple. Appreciate it. All the parts are available through our store, ihpartsamerica.com, and follow for more.